Scott Sauer, SEPTA's Chief Operating Officer, and Brian Pollitt, who is the President of TWU Local 234. And I'm going to turn it right over to Scott Sauer. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon. We're pleased to be here today to announce a tentative contract agreement with the Transport Workers Union Local 234. I want to thank the negotiating teams on both sides for working around the clock to get a tentative agreement in place. Everyone worked in good faith and urgency to get this done, and their efforts are greatly appreciated. This tentative agreement is both fair to our hard-working frontline employees and fiscally responsible to our customers and taxpayers that fund the authority. SEPTA's unprecedented fiscal crisis has made these negotiations particularly challenging, and thanks to the hard work that's done at the bargaining table, we've managed to avoid a strike, and we are in the best possible shape to continue the fight for funding and to preserve the critical services that SEPTA provides to the city and region. Like many other transit agencies across the nation, though, SEPTA has hit the fiscal cliff as a result of the pandemic. One-time federal COVID relief funds were used to cover the everyday expenses of running the system, maintaining service during the pandemic and supporting the post-pandemic recovery. Those funds were exhausted this past spring, creating a nearly $250 million annual budget deficit in the current fiscal year and beyond. A funding solution for public transportation proposed by Governor Shapiro earlier this year was not approved by the legislature before it had adjourned last week. And as you know, we've previously announced fare increase proposals, and we're preparing to announce service cuts early next year. In addition, SEPTA is now also implementing a number of austerity measures to cut costs. These include expanding the existing hiring freeze to include all open management and administrative positions that are not safety or operations critical, and reducing contract and consulting services as much as possible. Additional cost-cutting measures are being examined and will be put in place before the end of December. With this uncertainty looming, it was critical to get a contract in place that keeps service running, especially as ridership is growing. In October, SEPTA reached a new post-pandemic high, with ridership nearing 80% of pre-COVID levels. SEPTA's frontline employees keep the system running every day, and it was important to reach a fair contract so that we can continue to get students to school, people to work, medical appointments, and the services they need. Again, I want to thank the negotiating teams on both sides of the table for working around the clock to reach this tentative agreement that is a fair and fiscally responsible agreement. With that, I'll turn it over to President Brian Pollitt of the Transport Workers Union, Local 234.
All right. Good afternoon. Although these negotiations were tedious, hard-working, and it was a rumble, we made it happen. I could have called a strike on November 7th, but I chose not to. One, we were making headway. SEPTA's lead negotiator, Chad Cuneo, we pretty much, we can work in tandem sometimes, but sometimes, we're at each other's throat. But, being logical individuals, we got together and made it happen. A couple people I want to thank. Governor Shapiro for his leadership and his involvement in the process. And our international president, John Samuelson, TWU International President John Samuelson, who, basically was effortless in letting everyone know that he was in support of anything that we did here. And the patrons. Our patrons, it was a big, the patrons were a big reason why I continue to talk, because, I grew up in Philly. I used to take the bus to school, to church, to make grocery. So I know that it's a necessary need. And I was a former bus operator, so I know how the patrons, need the system. So a lot of it was, the citizens of the region. I didn't want them to have to go through a stoppage. And I tried and tried and tried. And I said in the news that in any event we had to draw a line in the sand, I would definitely call it. But I tried to continue talking, and I guess my strategy worked. Because in the end of the day, we got a contract, and my members are happy. Ratification for our contract will be on December 6th.
Question for you, Brian, is you had talked about how important the safety measures were for your members. Can you talk a little bit about some of more of the safety measures? You've mentioned a pilot program of buses.
Yes. Yeah, we talked, Chairman, General Manager, I'm sorry, Scott Sauer and I, we talk a lot, and that was one of the things that we focused on. And he and I, we had the ideal of the bulletproof enclosure for the bus operator. He agreed. They got the order out, and there's a pilot program, forthwith in the works. The only thing the manufacturer is waiting on is SEPTA to provide the bus so they could go in, make sure everything is engineered, that ain't even a word, that's not a word. Engineeredly, I guess, sound and ready to rock and roll. And after the first, after the first bus is taken care of, then there'll be 7 others. And they'll probably be out on the street next year around June.
Brian, how much do you think the threat of a triple strike with DC 33 and even 1594 increased your leverage at the table?
If I'm being honest, yeah, if I was SEPTA, I would have been worried about that as well. If all 3 of us would have went out at the same time, that's every 9,000, all the workers that move the city, and us, City Transit, 5,000, and Victory. You're talking about, and Frontier. So you're talking about the whole region, Delaware County, Montgomery County, City of Philadelphia, and the City of Philadelphia, workers.
Brian, I know you said these negotiations were in good faith, but how close were you to actually calling the strike? Did you ever get close?
Listen, I was pretty close, to be honest with you. I know you guys, and you may have, met me at the diner yesterday. Yesterday, we had a breakfast meeting, us, District Council 33, and 1594. And we were in talks about a date to pull the plug.
When you told the 2 other union leaders about this TA, did you have a conversation? And what was their reaction, considering that you guys had a conversation about potentially coordinating a united strike?
Well, we're all union people, and we know, that if we're all 3 of us are negotiating differently, if there's a deal on the table and it's fair to the membership, we knew that we would have to do what we had to do, being responsible leaders. So we all understood, what was going on. And then this morning, after my board my board basically agreed to the tentative, I called each individual and let them know what happened. And they said congratulations.
Can I ask, Brian, while you're still up there, can I ask one last question before I go
Okay.
to the microphone?
Yeah.
This is only a 1-year agreement, so you guys could be back at this soon if there isn't any changes in the legislature, and that might be a question for the governor's office too, I think there's a representative here. How much pressure do you think that you're going to put on lawmakers to make sure we get a comprehensive transportation funding package done, so you're not back in this situation again?
Well, if you remember, we had a rally October 1st, and at the Capitol about the same issue. Doesn't stop there. We're going to continue, with our political people on our side, as well as SEPTA's political person. I think her name is Pam McCormick. We worked in tandem back then. We're going to continue working in tandem in hopes that we could get transit funding, so we won't be back at this place next year.
One last question for Brian, too. Yesterday, you talked about concessions being that a raise would be offset by an increase in healthcare costs. What was the resolution of that?
No concessions. All right. That's Mr. Sauer.
Sorry, Mr. Sauer.
Okay. I never looked that good.
In regards to this, this 5% increase, how does this affect the overall budget? The deficit you're operating, will we see a negative impact in other areas?
I mean, there's still a deficit, and it's still roughly $153 million. This doesn't change that fact. It was going to be true regardless of whatever agreement we could come to with the Transport Workers Union as well as the other unions. And there's a structural deficit that has to be plugged. You know, to the point of the earlier question, this is not a healthy way for us to do business. We have to be able to come to long-term agreements with our unions for the good of the membership, for the good of the service, for the good of our customers. You know, our customers don't want to go through this cycle every single year of will we go on strike, will we not go on strike, will we be funded, will we not be funded. So that structural deficit has to be plugged at some point, and it's going to take a legislative action to do that. And we're eager to work alongside Brian and his staff to champion that cause and to speak to whoever we have to speak to get it done.
Scott, did you have some assurances from the governor's office about some sort of stopgap funding that would allow you to do this?
No, there has been no assurances. I mean, we certainly heard what the governor said in his remarks yesterday, and we're grateful for that, and we're always grateful for his support and the support of our delegation, the support of the city council. You know, we've had really great support from our legislators, you know, in the region, and the governor is certainly one of them. So we heard what he said, but there's been no promise made, and there's no guarantee coming.
Scott, now that this tentative deal is in place, what is the board considering, you know, when it comes to those fare increases and how they'll vote? What are they thinking about?
So the board will vote tomorrow on the 7.5% increase. And the fair hearings that are scheduled for December 13th for the 21.5 are scheduled, and they are going to occur. Provided that there are no alterations to that plan, then January 1st we'll see an additional 21.5% fair increase.
Are there any factors, though, that they're considering ahead of this vote, especially now that this deal is in place?
I don't want to speak directly for the board, but the only factor that really could alter the approach at this point is funding.
Oh, Scott, specifically, the money that is now going towards the 5% wage increase, that is coming from your stabilization fund.
No, that is money that we are going to draw from our operating budget, just as we do any other raise. Our stabilization fund, you know, contrary to maybe what's out there, is not just a pot of money that sits in the bank waiting to be used. It's something we use every day to pay our bills, to keep the business running. It's to keep us stable. It's not to bail us out. So the stabilization fund is not the factor that got the deal done.
So what got you between not being able to go into the operation funding to going into the operation funding literally between Monday and Wednesday?
We needed to get a deal done that was going to be good for the region. We always wanted to get the deal done, and we had to find common ground with the union to get to a fair place. We believe we did that, and the reason that happened is to keep service running. We have to demonstrate to our customers that we're going to run service, whether it's 20% less next year. We still have to run service, and we need the members to do that. If they had walked out and struck, you know, who knows for how long, but we wanted to do a deal that was fair, kept them working, keep service running, and we had to make a tough decision. And we're, like as I mentioned in my remarks, we're going to look for measures internally that we can offset some of this cost.
How big of a hit is this going to be for the operating budget?
I mean, there was a budgeted amount that we dedicated to negotiations this year, certainly, but it doesn't really change the deficit. The deficit is what it is, and this was not going to have a dramatic effect on that. But we are going to have to take drastic measures in the coming months to keep running as much as we can.
What's the exact timeline for service cut?
So we're still in the planning stages of that, but you would see service cut proposals probably coming late winter, early spring, with implementation in the summer.
Scott, last thing, how much would SEPTA earn from the first rate hike? What will you use it for? And then last thing would just be, what is your message to riders who suggest that you guys do not need to raise fares?
So I don't have the number on the first rate hike, but I can tell you the combination was, I believe, 45 million of the 29% and the 20% service cuts netted us about a $45 million increase in revenue. Far short of 153 million. And I'm sorry, say the second part.
What's your message to riders who suggest you guys do not need to increase fares?
Well, the message to riders is simply that public transportation is a service for them, and it's a highly subsidized service. We only draw about 20% of our operating revenue from the fare box. Even despite these hikes, that's not going to increase dramatically. There are things that we can do legislatively to try to decrease the risk of such a massive fare increase, and we need their support. We need them to talk to their legislators and do all the things that are necessary to get us the funding we need. We want to provide great service. We want to take care of the customers as much as we want to take care of our employees. We need both. And in order to do that, we need a funding source, and that's what we need to have happen next year.
What was SEPTA's point of view of a possible united strike, and how much did that move negotiations? And also, if you could share about Smart Local 1594, those contract talks?
We weren't. Look, we were concerned for our union employees. A strike by Local 234, a strike by 1594 would have been devastating to our customers, regardless of whatever actions were taken by the city unions. So we were concerned for our employees and making sure that we kept them on the job. So I would say that the unification of the three, I wouldn't say that played a big role, because two of them are ours, and we don't run service without our unions. So that was what drove negotiations all along. We want to give a fair contract to our employees. As far as 1594 is concerned, we're still in negotiations with them, and we'll be talking to them later today. And God willing, we'll come to some agreement with them as well. All right.
One more thing.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Sure.